Hello and welcome to Lesson Plan Part 2. This is Dr. Lori Benoit, and I'm going to review the second part of our lesson planning assessment. So your folder is right here. Remember, make sure that you have reviewed and watched the video for lesson plan and field lesson requirements right here. And then the lesson plan Part 2 folder is right here. So I think I already have that pulled up actually. Nope, I don't. I'll do it right now. So remember, we're going to go over the rubric at the end of this video. We're going to continue with our template and instructions and look at a sample. And there is a folder full of samples for you. So check them all out. They're all effective, but they're not flawless. And I do want you to know that, but they're good examples for you to be able to see. So let's go ahead and jump into our lesson plan. We had left off with student misconceptions. So we're going to look at the lesson progression now. So for the lesson progression, we are going to actually give the step-by-step lesson procedures. So under the teacher will and students will tabs, you need to have these things. Enter the lesson steps using numbered and or bullets. So numbers or bullet points. The steps should clearly describe the sequence of learning activities and should identify where and how all materials, technology tools, student-created technology products, and reproducible materials and handouts are utilized in the lesson. Be precise when explaining the teacher and student tasks during the learning activities. It should be written clear enough that the instructor could teach the lesson just as you envision it. Add a time to each activity and designate it in red font. Based on the overall goals of the lesson, determine how much time you will need to spend addressing each activity. The attention span of a regular education child is age plus 2, so plan accordingly. So consider if you are teaching 8th graders, they're around 13 years old, so 13 plus 2 is 15. You really should be changing activities a minimum of every 15 minutes. I wouldn't do it too fast, but if we do only one thing for the entire class period of 40 minutes, we're not changing enough. So identify pre-planned seed questions by green font. Identify pre-planned questions that will be used to foster deep conceptual understanding. Include probing questions with DOK level for students with misconceptions and or who need support. So a seed question should be asked every 10 to 15 minutes, okay? Seed questions should be open-ended, should be at least DOK 3 or 4, so higher level thinking, and answered in frequent, small group, purposeful talk and discussions, okay? So that's how you can tell what a seed questions is, and they do need to be in green font. The DOK is going to be the DOK levels. I'm going to put a document in the lesson planning folder. So if you need a refresher on what the web's depth of knowledge levels are, again, I'm going to put that in the folder. So here's an outline that you can use introducing the introduction and gain attention. Notice there are little bullet points that kind of give you some suggestions and look fors. Framing the lesson relevance, again, bullet pointed look fors, things to consider. Motivating introduction and hook. And then the lesson activity should be developed with a gradual release model. So the gradual release model is linked right here. So if you need a refresher on what the gradual release model is, it's linked. Not all groupings have to occur in all lessons. So what this means is, for example, it's going to give you some samples for whole group, small group, paired practice, guided practice, individual practice. So what it's trying to say here is that you may not, for example, have one of these groupings. Maybe you don't have guided practice or something like that. So what it's trying to say is these are presented to you as options. And if you follow this template, it's a pretty strong option, but you can modify this to meet your specific learners, your specific content, and your specific lesson goals, the objectives that you have for the lesson. So they're provided to help you and give you things to think about, but it's not saying your lesson has to follow this exact format. Okay. And then, yeah, okay, let's go ahead and look at the sample really quickly. So remember, it said that the teacher and students' actions needed to be clearly explained. Well, I really love the way that this particular student did it. On the left-hand side, she has the teacher will, and on the right-hand side, this is what the students would be doing. So, and it really marks it down here. So she's got introduction, gain attention, 5 minutes. She's saying what she's going to be doing. And then right at the same time, she's saying what the students should be doing at that point. Framing the lesson relevance. This is what the teacher is doing. This is what the students should be doing at that point. Motivating introduction hook. Again, what she's doing, what they're doing. And notice she's got her timestamps. And she also has those seed questions or seed prompts, seed questions and seed prompts. Those are labeled in green throughout. So, wow, this is a thorough lesson plan. If I had to step in and facilitate this lesson, I feel like I could, because this teacher has been so thorough in what she's going to do and what she expects the students to do. Okay, so that tells you how to do the lesson progression. We're going to go to the next part of the lesson plan. Yeah, here we go. So let's go to the next part of the lesson plan. Sorry, computer's freezing up on me. And this is the instructional resources and curriculum materials. So this is for the teacher, the student, the teacher, the student. And this gives a place for you to list the resources. Think about the materials. Are they accurate? Are they comprehensive? Are they appropriate? Et cetera, et cetera. So you list instructional resources on this side, and you list technology resources on the right side. So the left side's instructional, technologies on the right side. And this, she's got everything listed right out here. Again, she's considered what the students are going to need at each part. The next part of the lesson plan template is the International Society for Technology and Education. So these are our ISTE standards. If you're not familiar with those, there is a link provided here. This is something that you should have done in your Education 245 course, and you also should be revisiting it in the planning course 317 and 318. But just in case, it's linked here for you. And so this teacher, she actually just copied and pasted straight from that linked document. And these are the standards that she is implementing in this particular lesson: designer and knowledge constructor. The next portion of it is of the lesson plan template is the assessments. So we want to consider, how will we check for student understanding throughout the lesson? How will you and your students know if they have successfully met the objectives? What specific criteria will be met in a successful product or process? What does success of this lesson's objectives look like? Did you include informal and formal assessments that clearly align to the objectives and reflect the procedures of the lesson plan? Reminder, a lesson will not have more than one formal assessment, so a work sample, to be collected for analysis or grading. If it's more than one, that's too much. And a formal assessment is something that we're talking about, like that you're taking up for a grade. We call those summative assessments. And so identify the assessment and identify what skill, concept, or objective you will be assessing. If a grouping will not occur during this lesson, then write not applicable for it, okay? And so right here, she has presented her assessment plan. For whole group, this is how she's checking for informal. She tells what it is. She tells what she's going to be looking for. Small group, this is what she's looking for. Formal, this is the written responses. They're going to actually turn these in. And then guided practice, informal, questioning, and quick check. And notice, she doesn't just tell me what they are. She tells me what she's looking for. Okay. So let's go down. Next is the differentiation piece. And so we want to consider how we are modifying to accommodate for content, process, and product. This is differentiation by instruction. And you will use your model for differentiation to create your DI statement. And you place the tier 1 best practice strategy that differentiates by content, process, and product in the box below that it aligns with. And then the differentiation by learner, interest, ability, and learning profile. Again, use your model for differentiation to create that DI statement to incorporate differentiate for interest, ability, and learning profile, and you put it in the box below. Notice that here's the justification statement for content, and here's the one for process. Here's one for product. And that just gives you an idea. You also have readiness, interest, and learning profile. So let's look at these. She highlighted them in yellow, which I greatly appreciated. That made it much, much easier for me to find in the template. Also, this one didn't have the boxes, but that's okay. This was just an earlier version of our lesson plan format. So here's her statement for process, and here's her statement for learning profile and style. Notice she didn't hit anything for content or product, and she didn't hit anything for learner ability or interest. She just left those blank. She focused on process, differentiating process, and she focused on differentiating learning profile and learning style. So this is to let you know you don't have to hit all 6 of these. You're aiming for at least one of instruction and at least one of learner. You can do more, but you're not required to. And then real-time scaffolding. So scaffolding, it has to be more than just a worksheet or additional book work. Real-time scaffolding is instructional support that we are providing for students at different learning levels, different learning tiers. And so if we look at the sample, we can see how this particular learning tier 1 means that they fully understood the lessons and the concepts. So these students received a challenge activity. Tier 2, they mostly understood. This was an emphasis activity. So after reading the required remainder of the book, then this was an activity or something for them to do. And then tier 3 is a supporting activity. So those who might need just a little bit more support because it's apparent they do not understand the concepts. So notice that this is a post-lesson scaffolding. So this could be done after the lesson. Our lesson template actually says real-time scaffolding. So what are some things that we could do within the lesson? And then, of course, feel free to discuss things that you could do after the lesson as well. You can modify this version of your lesson plan to either fit real time, so things that would happen within the class period, or post lesson. Either way is acceptable. And that's why I showed you the sample of post lesson. I wanted you to see how you could do it either way. And then lastly are those research-based practices. This is not part of this lesson plan, but you are welcome to put them. If there is anything that you would like to say where you got your idea from or why you're using this strategy, this is where you would give an explanation of your research-based instructional strategies. All right, so let's go ahead and take just a moment to look at the rubric for the planning. So remember lesson plan part 1 and lesson plan part 2. So I separated them out into 2 modules, but you would receive 1 full grade for them. You're going to have an opportunity. You are actually going to grade a peers. So you're going to do a peer grading activity. Of course, you have access to this document so that you can do a self grade before you even put it in for the peer grade. So you're going to have an opportunity to grade a peers, and then that will give you also time to revise your own based on the peer feedback. So I wanted you to see this rubric because if you follow the template perfectly, then you are set up for success on this rubric. We are aiming for a 3, a proficiency of a 3. 4 is wonderful. That's fantastic. But we're aiming for a 3 on our lesson plan. We do know and understand that the lesson plan template is very lengthy, and this is not something that you would be doing for every single lesson that you do when you are in a real classroom serving in a real teacher capacity. But a teacher preparation program allows you several opportunities to be very thoughtful and intentional about developing a lesson plan, simply because we want you to consider all these factors when you are actually in an authentic setting. How do learners learn? Where are standards connected? How am I assessing learners? Am I differentiating enough in the lesson to meet all my learners' needs? So these are things that we kind of get used to just following a script, so to speak, with a curriculum, but we want to teach you how to modify that curriculum to truly meet all of our learners' needs. And this full-blown lesson plan allows you the opportunity to explore how to do that. So domain 1 is planning and preparation on the Danielson rubric. And component 1 is demonstrating knowledge of content and pedagogy. So notice on the left-hand side, we're talking about knowledge of content and the structure of the discipline, knowledge of the prerequisite relationships, knowledge of content-related pedagogy. Pedagogy is a fancy word for saying teaching and teaching strategies. 1B is demonstrating knowledge of students. How do they learn? Adolescent development, the learning process, student skills, knowledge and language proficiency, knowledge of students' interests and cultural heritage, knowledge of their special needs. So notice the lesson plan, thinking of standards, where they're aligned, what prior learning do they need? What are their values? What are their backgrounds? The cultural relevance piece, all of that brings that into your success on this rubric. So if you follow the template, you're getting set up for success here. 1C is setting instructional outcomes. So that's why we work so hard on the standards, aligning the standards to the objectives. What's the value sequence and alignment? Are they clear? Are they balanced? Are they suitable for diverse learners? 1D is demonstrating knowledge of resources. So resources for the classroom use, resources to extend content, knowledge, and pedagogy, resources for students, designing coherent instruction. So that's why that learning progression has to be so detailed. What are the activities? What are the materials being used? How is grouping being used? What's the lesson and unit structure? Congruence with instructional outcomes is the first part of designing student assessments. So notice, if you've been thorough in explaining how you're going to assess student learning, you should be doing pretty well on this part of the rubric. And then lastly, technology is not part of your grade. So we will score this, but we do not put it as part of your grade, okay? We give a little bit of feedback, but it's not included in your grade. It's something that we're simply trying to track. And that will set you up for success on the lesson plan. This concludes part 2 of the lesson plan. Please let me know if you have any questions. Happy planning. Enjoy this. And I hope you learned a lot from the experience.